Good evening. This is that one guy broadcasting from snowy Holland. Alright, so far we've covered how to do everything with the basic Helios craft. Well, in order to push our space program further, we're going to need something a little bit bigger. And yes, I do mean we're moving up to the three-man pod, which is the Mark 1-2 command pod. Now, this offers a variety of things that I like to do, and first things first, we need a name. So we're going to call this... Alright, we're going to call it the Lapis Maris 1, and for those of you who don't know Latin, that's Stone of the Sea. So we're going to click on Utility, we're going to grab a Clampetron shielded docking port, and the reason for this is because looking at this, it just makes a lot more sense, and for now we're just going to want to keep the docking ports aligned with our control settings, and that comes into play with a whole bunch of different stuff eventually that I will cover later. So we're not going to talk about it. Then we're going to do the same trick that we did when we put a docking port on our other spacecraft. We're going to snap to angles and set the symmetry to 2. This time I've found the 2 parachutes are a necessity. So now we have the part that's going to return to Kerbal, and this is a pretty basic command pod for a pod that has docking. So next we're going to need to go ahead and grab up the big Rocco Max brand coupler, and we're going to put it on there. Now, we can build the rocket up underneath it. Again, we're going to need some certain things. An advanced SAS module, the big one. An RCS fuel tank, the big one. And a fuel pod. The 16-liter one. The quick way to figure out the total mass is, or 16,000 liter maybe. The quick way to figure out the max is the number after X200 or X200. Let's see, this is also X200, and then this is the Jumbo 64. Is the total amount of fuel in hundreds. So this carries 6,400 liters of fuel. This carries 1,600 liters of fuel. This carries 3,200. This carries 800. So all we really need for orbital flight is this, because we're not going to leave Kerbal orbit just yet. And why are you not letting me connect? Alright, we're going to do that, outsmart technology, and that. Now, again, as we use the LV-909 for our Helios craft, we're going to use the Poodle engine for our Lapis Maris 1. And the reason for this is we don't need a whole lot of power once we actually get into orbit. It's all about burn times, as we learned in the well, not really about burn times, but it's about getting there rather than getting there quickly. So we're going to do the same configuration of RCS thruster blocks as we did before, and there we go. That's the craft that we're going to be flying around in space with 3 dudes in it. So we're going to bring this up. And now we're going to actually start building the system that will get this into orbit. First thing we're going to need is another decoupler. And the nice thing is, the fairings still work, so the rocket doesn't look as janky as it did in 0.17. Because before these fairings were here, you actually had to look at the engine itself. It was kind of weird, and if you downloaded the old demo, you could have seen that effect. But that game is nothing like this anymore. Next, we're going to grab up a Rocco Max Jumbo blah 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 blah. Then we're going to grab up a Rocco Max 3200, the steel one, the 3200 one. And we're going to put another mainsail engine on this. So now, this is actually not enough to get into orbit anymore. We need a little more oomph. And now I'm going to introduce you to something that the KSP community calls the asparagus design. It's one of the most efficient ways to get into orbit. What we need is radial decouplers, and I like the TT70 radial decoupler. It puts things far enough away from the rocket that you have enough room to maneuver. So what we're going to do is we're going to put these on with 8 times symmetry right now. And there we are. That's a bunch of decouplers. We're going to go back to propulsion. we're going to grab up the FLT-400 fuel tank. It's just your basic small fuel tank. It's what we used in the rocket that we put up there for the Helios 3. That was our main command pod fuel tank. Next we're going to grab up the FLT-800, put that on there. Then we're going to grab up another FLT-800 and put it on there. And finally we're going to top it off with more of the 400s. Then, so that it doesn't look completely, well, garage built, we're going to go ahead and put an aerodynamic nose cone on this. Next, we need to actually secure these to the rocket itself and to each other. So we're going to get a connector strut. It's an EAS-4 strut connector. We're going to click on the inside of the external liquid fuel boosters, and we're going to click here. And as long as you have the 8x symmetry, we have a nice connection that looks the same all the way around. Don't worry if it looks jankier than this. So long as it's connected and relatively close to each other, it works fine. Next, we're going to come up to the top, and we're going to put one strut on the inside here. Then, we're going to run it down. Oh, that didn't work. Sometimes you can't quite get the right angle, so we're going to put it on the stack itself, and then run it onto the main fuel tank, like that. This is going to secure all of the rockets to each other, and it ensures that there's not going to be wobble up top, as these decouplers down here, as we zoom into them a little bit, will keep the external tanks there. Now, the next and possibly two most important things of this are we're going to put on an LV T30 liquid fuel engine. That is the non-vectoring engine. What that will allow us to do is crank out a lot of power, and we're going to use this to turn the rocket, because this mainsail actually has vectoring. Next, we're going to click on the mainsail and bring it down to the... We're going to bring it down to stage 4 so that all of these are lighting off at the same time. Now you're thinking, well, these are just going to burn out, and then we are not really going much faster once these fall off. Well, that's true, which is why we're going to use the FXT2 external fuel duct. We're going to scroll down to the bottom of these stacks, and we're going to rotate the camera in a really goofy way so that we can click on this bottom fuel tank, and you can do this with any fuel tank, but I like connecting bottom to bottom because I'm weird like that. So you click on that, then you click on the inner stack. Now you'll notice that there are some arrows here. Let me zoom in on this. You'll notice that there are some arrows here. That indicates what direction the fuel is going. So what's happening is, not only are these outer boosters, liquid boosters, I have no idea what to call them. Not only are these liquid boosters feeding their engines, they're also using an... I would have to do the math, but it's something crazy. Each of them is feeding 1/8 of this engine for the duration. That means when you decouple these, and they're empty, this will still be a full tank of fuel. This is the most efficient way to get into space with rockets. There is some debate going around the forums, but mathematically, this is the way to do it. So yeah, that looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and save it. So let's go ahead and revel as well for 1 second, because this is your first 3-man rocket. Congratulations. Now, before we take the Lapis Maris out, let's go ahead and check what's over us. Well, we've got the Helios 3 debris still going around the Earth. What the hell? Helios 2, Helios... Well, we're getting a nice little debris cloud. It's not bad. And I think that will go away eventually. The Helios 3 right here is just, it did not deorbit. So to save time, and instead of just deorbiting it, I like this feature. I'm going to click Abort. Terminate. Excellent. We have clear skies. We're going to go to the launch pad, and we're going to launch the Lapis Maris 1. Head, and there we are. Excellent. Now you'll see I've actually got it sitting on this bottom rocket. That's not a problem as long as we go through our pre-flight. We're going to crank up to 80, in 3, 2, 1. Now the reason I'm able to get away with this is a goofy glitch in the game engine. Because this tank right here, the Rockomax 64X with its foam, for whatever reason causes more overheat on this engine. But it was a lot simpler than having you stack some cans for the last couple of missions, because it's weird structural things can happen, and I didn't feel like explaining them. Now, I assume that you went through your yes, I speak English. I assume you went through your pre-flight. If you didn't, well, your rocket's probably still sitting on the pad. A quick note, if any of these tutorials are moving too fast, feel free to watch some of the previous ones and make comments and suggestions as to what I can do to better suit your needs in the future. So again, when we reach 5,000 meters, we're going to do a nice gravity turn. We're going to slow down a little bit. We're going to do a gravity turn, and as you see, even though we don't have winglets, we actually have a much more responsive craft because we're basically just using the mainsail as a giant rudder, along with a very efficient propulsion method. And again, I'm going to try and max out the G's at around 2 during the ascent stage. So let's go to the map view and look at that anomalous debris that I'm probably going to clear out between episodes. We're still rising. That's good. Now, especially with radial boosters, I'm going to let you in on a little secret for the separation. As soon as these run out of fuel, I'm going to hold down F so that when we separate, we're rotating at the same speed and any minor corrections by the mainsail won't actually bump me into those. So I'm holding F. We're out from between them. I let go of F, and we continue on our way. Now, notice, we actually have a full fuel tank here and a full fuel tank here to work with. And we're already almost 20 kilometers in the air for all intensive purposes. And I'm not sure why we're shaking so damn much. But I have a design similar to this that gets into space, so we're gonna roll with it. And here we go, we're building up some nice, I guess not really velocity, but altitude. And again, we're just going to get into orbit, nice and simple, and this is probably going to be a nice, short, sweet episode about the nuances of rocket design. Whoop, got a little past 3. Alright, I'm going to cut the thrust down to almost 10% right now. That's because I don't really... okay, maybe 20%. That's because I don't really need that much power. In fact, I need less than a G to make this turn efficiently. Especially if you're just using the Rockomax without any, stuff. Yeah, that was specific. Without any winglets. Now I'm going to crank it back out so it's cranking about 2 Gs. Until this reaches 100 kilometers, because that is my parking orbit. And this is going to come down out of orbit, probably. I hope, at the very least. Because that... if I had launched any later, that could have crashed into our rocket. That would have been interesting. Okay. So, here we go. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, X. Now, let's take a look at our rocket overall. This has no fuel in it. That's not a problem, because this has over half of its fuel left, which means we can use this to get almost into orbit, which is what we want, so that this deorbits on a suborbital trajectory, trajectory. There we are. I'm going to crank out a little bit of thrust in order to turn the craft down to the prograde vector. And mind you, this is just an orbital review, but I'm doing this with a 3-man craft so that I can run you through the basics of how to get a 3-man craft with this style of booster system into orbit. Now we're going to crank out to about 2 Gs. And what may happen, I'm not entirely sure, but we may actually get to a velocity that we need before we run out of fuel. If that's the case, you don't want your periapsis to be any greater than 10,000 meters. That may not seem like a lot. Yep. Yeah, 17 works. Anything actually over 20 will probably keep this thing in orbit forever. But that's not the case. Now, we disconnect that, and we throttle up slowly with that rocket and push it back towards the prograde. Now I'm going to throttle this up to 100% as we did with the other rocket. There we are. We're in a sustainable elliptical orbit. And then you can straighten out as much as you want, but as you see, we have almost an entire small fuel tank to work with up here. That's how, I guess I don't want to say efficient, but that's how good this is. I would hazard that I could probably get to the Mun and back with this. Not a very high Mun, or not a very low Mun orbit, but I could probably do it. It might be a challenge for me at one point. But let's run through some of the systems. You have the RCS, which you should be familiar with that right now. The INJKIL setup for the docking is the preferred method that I use. Next, we have the Clampotron shielded docking port. If you right-click on it, you can do control from here, which again is not important because it faces the same way that our cockpit does, so you never ever need to do that. But there's another option, Open Shield, and if you click that, and right-click off of it again, you see that the docking port actually comes out. So that is how you access the Clampotron shielded docking port. So we're going to go ahead and close that. Another thing that I'm going to cover in this episode is EVA. That's these little buttons right here. And now that we have some time, I'm going to show you what they are. There's EVA and IVA. For the IVA, if you click on that, it brings you inside the rocket itself. Now this is pretty cool. They've done a lot of texture work. You can do this with 2 of the cockpits and both rocket pods and the lander can. But we haven't gotten around to the lander can yet. You can do this with both rocket pods. It's really cool. You can look around and you see the terrified expressions on some of the other Kerbals' faces. The other Kerbal, the commander, is actually sitting down underneath us right now. It's not an Apollo-style capsule. It's different. But you have all your pertinent information, your control panel, your throttle, a ground radar, a vertical speed indicator, an altimeter, your nav ball. It's all here, and you can use the mouse wheel to zoom in and out, and if you right-click, you can look around, right-click again, you get your mouse back. So like I was saying, right around in here, yeah, you can see his helmet right there, is where your other Kerbal is. Now you can switch between the Kerbals by hitting V, and you can switch back out by hitting C. Now, we're also going to cover EVA. And we're going to take Bill Kerman out for a little walk. EVA stands for extravehicular activity. That means stepping outside of the craft. Now, you're going to need to know this if you're going to walk on the Mun someday, and for right now, if you're going to get your Kerbals into a space station, which is probably what I'm going to cover the next episode. A very simple station just to get your bearings and, I guess, simulate long-duration spaceflight for travel to the planets. So there's 2 ways to do this. You can either click the EVA button on the crew member you want to EVA, or you can click on the crew hatch. And it gives you a list of the people you can EVA. Now, we can EVA Bill Kerman, and we have a ladder right here that if we hold S, we climb down, if we hold W, we climb up, and we have the option to hit F to board. But we don't want to do that. Space is let go, so congratulations, we are floating in space, but we're not really going anywhere. If you hit R, you pull out this little MMU. It's called the Man Maneuvering Unit. The controls are WASDA, then Q and E will rotate your character. Control will cause downward translation, I guess, towards your feet. Shift will cause upwards, and because we are moving at the same velocity as the craft, we don't really have to worry about orbits. But it's getting to be dark, so if I hit L, there we go. We can take a look at this magnificent craft. And you can play around with this. Just right-click on the backpack if you want to know how much MMU fuel you have left. And I'm not even close to concerned, so we're going to go over here. And here's actually kind of a fun thing. We're going to just be very gentle, and we're going to do this. We're going to position him outside the window, like a creeper from Minecraft. Then we're going to hit the button that will switch ships. We're going to hit C, and we're going to look out the window with... Oh, he must have gone away. Half the time you can see him, half the time you can't. Yeah, he drifted away. The other option is we can put him out in front. We can put him out in front. Ah, goodness. He follows the camera, which is why I'm having some issues. And I don't do spacewalks that often. There we go. We'll put him out in front. Switch back to this craft, hit C, hit V. Then we will... Oh, there he is. And we can see our comrade outside. That's pretty cool. So now to get back in, what you do is you just maneuver yourself back over towards the ladder. And short bursts work best here. If you do long bursts, you're wasting fuel and such. You get towards the ladder, you get the option F to grab. Then you can hit F again to board when you're over the hatch, and bam, everybody's there. Deorbiting is pretty simple. All you have to do is point to the retrograde and burn until your periapsis reaches re-entry of 25,000 meters, and your parachutes will deploy, similar to the Helios 3. And I'm going to assume you know how to do that, so I'm going to shorten up these episodes in preparation for a couple of big ones like space stations and the Mun. And after that, well, we could gear up for some interplanetary travel, but after that, you guys tell me what you want to learn. And if it's something I don't know how to do very well, it's going to take a little while, but I'll practice and I'll teach you. This has been That One Guy. Thanks for watching.